104.7 The Cave, Mike the Intern. Very special interview today. You probably heard me talking about Record Store Day a couple weeks ago, and I'd mentioned one of the releases they had was from a band that was in the Tulsa area back in the mid to late 60s called Marble Phrogg. That record is very sought after in the record collecting world as being one of the most expensive and sought after psych records of the late 60s, and they repressed it for Record Store Day, so of course I had to grab a copy. I went on the air, started talking about it, and I had a woman reach out to me and say, "Hey, I heard you talking about my friend's band." And I was like, "What are you talking about? You know those guys?" She goes, "Yeah, I went to school with the guitar player." And I said, "Please, God, if there's any way you can get a hold of him, see if he wants to do a show, please, I would love to do an interview with him." And she made good on it and got me in touch with Hoppy Niles from Marble Phrogg, also in a bunch of other bands later on, more currently Uncle Zepp. And we'll get into that stuff in a little bit. But first of all, Hoppy, thank you so much for taking the time this morning for the show. I really appreciate it, sir.
Good morning, Mike. Thank you.
It's really good to see you. Thank you so much for calling in. So let's start at the beginning. When and how did you hear about this record? Because again, there was 100 copies as far as I know that were made, and that's part of the reason it's so valuable. But at what point did anyone say, "Hey, do you remember that Marble Phrogg record you made? Do you know how much that's worth?"
I think it was 1989, I believe it was. The other guitar player in the band, Marble Phrogg, he was living in Tulsa. He ran a record store, Starship Records. And I had moved back to Oklahoma from Chicago and had a band, and he came to see me. And he brought a Goldmine magazine, and which is a collectible records magazine. Looked like a Rolling Stone, but anyhow, we were listed in there as one of the 100 most valuable albums. Matter of fact, on the front page was the Beatles' Dead Babies album.
Yeah.
And then you open it up to like page 5, I believe it was, and there was a full page of the back of our album cover. There's artwork on there that's pretty weird, pretty amazing. And
but
then,
it fits the genre.
Yeah. Then I started listening to 100 most valuable albums. There was a picture of the front of our cover, and then it had a little paragraph saying that was listed for, it was selling for well more than the listed price of $500. And that was back in '89, you know. So that's when I became aware that it was worth something. You know?
And you went back home.
We don't know how many were actually, I'm sorry?
Did you just go back home and you're like, okay, I got to find. I know I have at least one or two.
I had one, and I'll be honest with you. I only kept one because we don't know how many were pressed. We thought maybe 250, but we're not sure if that's right or not, because we kind of bailed on the contract. We weren't very happy with the recording quality, and so we kind of bailed on the guy, and that's why there weren't that many out there. I assume, you know, but I've seen that thing listed. I've heard people pay upwards of almost $2,000 for some of them, depending on condition. And I saw a sealed copy. I don't know if it sold or not, but it was listed a couple of years ago online. They were asking $4,500 for it. You know, have no idea if he sold it or not. But anyhow,
it's possible.
Anyhow, '89, I guess it was when I heard that it was worth money. You know, we were shocked.
Yeah, I can't. I mean, it's just like if in one of the bands I was in high school or college that we did a 7-inch release or a CD, and then years later you get a call, "Hey, guess what? Those are selling for." I mean, it's possible. But what's amazing to me is that this record, it's a really cool time capsule because I believe there are 2 original songs on that album. Is that correct? That you guys wrote yourselves? Right. And the rest are covers. And it's not that the covers are your take on those songs, but it's a really cool, I just thought it was a really cool release because it has those on there that fit into that time period and where everyone's head was at musically. But then you guys bring in your stuff and it just works so well together. And it just blows my mind that all these years later, you know, we're still talking about something that essentially the way you explained it to me was just a bunch of dudes that were in a college band together.
Yeah. And those were just songs that we did at gigs. You know, we played a lot. and that was just the stuff we did at gigs, you know. And yeah, we got together in '66 at OSU, and we were Captain Hook and the Pirates for a year. But anyhow, about a year later, music started to change, and Cream came out, and Hendrix, Iron Butterfly, and so we decided we needed to change our name. You know, Captain Hook wasn't cool anymore. So one night after a gig, we were the drummer and I were living in a trailer, mobile home, and everybody came over after a gig one night, midnight or so, and we said, we've got to change our name. We've got to have a new name. And so we sat there and we threw out all kinds of names. Somebody said Marble Phrogg. I go, no, that's stupid. You know, and about 4 o'clock in the morning, when everybody's passing out, about to go to sleep, somebody said, hey, it's Marble Phrogg. Let's go to bed. And but we decided to spell it Phrogg. We thought that was cool. So Iron Butterfly, Marble Phrogg. That's how that came about.
I love that every band has had that time. Every single band has always been. It's just back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Finally, it's like Marble Phrogg. Screw it, we're done. Let's move on.
We're done. Let's go to bed.
I love it. Something else Hoppy did tell me, which I thought was very interesting, was when they went on to repress this record for the most recent Record Store Day. They came to find out that obviously the master tapes had been destroyed because, you know, hindsight's 2020. When you made this record, you probably had no idea what it ended up would happen with it. But so go through the process of what they did to actually repress that record.
Well, we were actually about a year ago. We were contacted by actually a guy in Spain first, and he put us in. He wanted to redo the album. Put us in touch with a guy in Denver, and I talked to him. I didn't really like him a whole lot. Real business guy, and I didn't, you know, and he didn't offer us very much money. And just like a week later, I got contacted by another guy here in Oklahoma that wanted to do the same thing. And a really nice guy, runs a record store here, and I guess they've done this before, and made us a much, much better deal. And so we decided to go with him. We searched and searched to try and find the Bill Davis, Derek Records. He owned Derek Records, but he was actually a school teacher. I knew him, and he taught for a couple of years. And I grew up in Guthrie, Oklahoma, and he taught high school there for a couple of years. He was a guitar player, and then he moved on to Tulsa. 3 of the guys in our band were from Tulsa, so we always said we're a Tulsa band. 2 of us were from Guthrie, and 3 of us were from Tulsa. And anyhow, Bill contacted us and said, you know, I want to record an album. And so we did. We actually did this in 2 different places. I remember one of the places was a vacant office building. You know, we built baffles and stuff and did that. And the other one, I'm trying to remember what it was. It was in the basement of an old bank or something. I can't remember. But anyhow, we tried to contact Bill. Don't think Bill's alive anymore. But we did get a hold of a guy or actually he contacted us. But the drummer, Roger Worley, had gone to high school with this guy. And he said he had met him, he had seen him at a reunion, and gave Roger a sealed copy of the album. And he said that he was supposed to have been a distributor for the album. And originally he had 25 of them. And so I went up to Tulsa and met with him, and he gave me 3 sealed copies of the album. And there was a couple of 45s made too. There was one of the original songs on it. On the other side was Fire by Hendrix. Mm-hmm. And I think there was another 45, and I can't really remember. I don't know why they did 2, but there was another one, and it had a different cover song on the back of it. I can't actually remember right offhand. But anyhow, due to the fact we got a hold of a guy that knew Bill and said that the masters had been recorded over. And so I met with the guy and got 3 sealed copies. And the person the people that redid the album used one of the sealed copies for that.
And transferred it over.
Open it up. Yeah, I watched him open it up, and that's how they did it.
Man, what an incredible story. But Hobby didn't just stop at Marble Phrogg. Obviously, you've been a musician. You've been a career musician your entire life.
Yeah.
As you mentioned, you have a prosthetic. I believe it is your strumming hand, right?
It is.
Yeah,
I got a hook. Where's that? Okay.
Which that was the other part of the story was like, I can't believe I'm making this connection with this record I just bought from the guy who made it. And then he tells me over the phone, yeah, I play with a hook. And I go, you're a hook? And he goes, no, a prosthetic. And I go, wow, this story just got even more incredible.
Yeah. I've been playing all my life, steadily, all my life. I actually, after everybody flunked out of college, I was not the lead singer on this particular song. I am a lead singer, and I have been since shortly after the record was recorded. Mike Freeman was the lead singer. We actually, going back, we had the 5 musicians together. I'm sorry, this is going back a bit. We had the 5 musicians together, and we're at rehearsal, and somebody said, we need a singer. And I said, well, let me try. And I sang like 2 songs, and they go, we need a singer. And so we found Mike Freeman.
Thanks,
he fronted the band, played a little bit of keyboard, but mostly fronted the band. But shortly after the record was recorded, we were all flunking out of school because we played music. We were busy. We played music constantly, more often at OU in Norman than actually in Stillwater, but around the state. Anyhow, I lost my train of thought. Hang on. What were we talking about?
I've been playing
music all my life, right?
The guy who sang lead on the Marble Phrogg record.
Vietnam was going on, and the draft got Mike. And in music, like I said, music had changed. Led Zeppelin had just come out, and which blew my mind. And that's where my vocal range was. So when Mike got drafted, I became the lead singer. And then we started doing a lot of Led Zeppelin and stuff. But the last bass player I had in the Marble Phrogg, I had a couple. After people started getting drafted, Roger went to the Navy because he was going to get drafted. And anyhow, I started changing guitar players and drummers and stuff. And the last bass player that I imported him from Wichita, Kansas. And we started having trouble with the bass player and the other guitar player. And there was a band called the Moaning Glories, a big, in Wichita, they were a very big band. And actually we played there a lot and we were well known. And the Moaning Glories broke up, and Rick said, hey, let's go up to Wichita and talk to a couple of those guys and see if we can put a band together. And we did. And we're instantly well known. And so 3 of the guys were from Wichita, so I moved to Wichita. We played up there for about 3 years. Then I moved on to Denver. Played there for a couple of years. Couldn't make a living there because it was all top 40, and I was not a top 40 person. And so I was in a trio, and we wanted to add another player. And the last bass player I had in that band had just moved there from Chicago. And he goes, I know a guy. And so we flew him into Denver. He played with us for about a week, stayed there for a week. We rehearsed, and he actually sat in at a gig. And he flew back home, and about a month later, he called back and said, yeah, I want to join the band. But you guys need to move to Chicago because this is where the work is. And he was right. So in summer of 75, we packed up and went to Chicago, which I think at the time was probably the greatest place for a working rock and roll band to be. There was so many bars and clubs. They were big, huge clubs. You could play anywhere from what they call the Chicagoland area, which was northern Indiana up to Milwaukee and Madison, Wisconsin, and go home at night. Actually, for the first 2 years, we didn't do that. We were on the road. We played around Chicago for a couple of months, and then we hit the road for 2 or 3 months, all around the Midwest, as far out as Arizona, New Mexico, Arizona, up to Wyoming, Colorado, Wyoming, down to Texas, Oklahoma. And we did that for a couple of years, but, the road crew had to get paid, and we constantly were spending money on blowing PA stuff and having to fix it. And if you didn't pay the road crew, they'd quit. And so we finally figured out that if we stayed in Chicago, we could play that Milwaukee and go home at night, northern Indiana and go home at night, sleep our own beds, and started making a lot more money, So, that was Cheap Trick was just coming on as a big bar band. They just hired Robin. They had another singer for about a year. His name was Zeno. And they fired him, and they found Robin playing in a folk music in a, coffee houses. And anyhow, I got to know those guys really well. We played a lot of gigs together and stuff, and Robin and I became pretty good friends. Anyhow, I stayed in Chicago for 12 years. I had, the band was called Angel. And about a year after that, a band from New York named Angel came out with a record called Angel. So we changed our name to Pinups. That band, I was in it for about 4.5 years. And I got a call one day. I was watching the Dinah Shore show, and there was England Dan and John Ford Coley on. And I knew those guys. They were in a band. They were from Dallas. And they used to play a lot of gigs at OU. And we did too, fraternity gigs and stuff. And we became friends. And about a week after I saw these guys on TV, I got a phone call from the lead guitar player, lead guitar player, Ovid Stevens. And he said, man, long time, haven't talked to you in 15 years, but he said, the last tour through Chicago, I got married. I met a girl and got married to a girl from Chicago. And he goes, we're planning to leave Dan and John, and we need a front man. And she says, you're the guy. And I was on the top of the music scene in Chicago, and it was really a hard decision to make. But eventually I made the decision. They flew me out there, and I spent a week with them and came back, and they called me every week going, we want you. And I made the decision to go out to LA, and I got out there and it sucked. It was a bad decision, man. That was over, when I quit that deal, my manager was out there, and Cheap Trick's manager, Ken Adam, and were out there together. My manager owned a piece of Cheap Trick. And so I met with them and said, man, I want to stay in LA. I like it out here. And Ken said, I don't know anything about LA, but I've got an office here, and there's a guy that runs it for me. Go meet with him. So I met with him for like 3 different times and played him my music and stuff. And he goes, man, you need to go back to Chicago. He said, nobody knows who you are out here. You'll have to wait tables or something to make a living. You can go back to Chicago and you can put a band together, and you can get a recording contract just as quick there as you can here. So I went back to Chicago, and I played in a few different bands. And finally I was approached one night by a guy in a band called Star Trooper. And he said, we want to fire a singer. We need a new singer, and we think we want you. And so I went to listen to him one night, and I didn't like him. And I said, I don't think this will work out. And they go, man, please just let's meet, let's talk. Okay. So they came back to my apartment, and I played my music for them and stuff. Well, they'd heard it anyhow. And they convinced me that at least to go rehearse with them, and so I did. And man, it was great. It worked out great. And so I joined Star Trooper, and about 2 months later, we became One Arm Bandit. All their music changed. We were playing a lot of original stuff, mostly original stuff, my stuff and their stuff. And anyhow, it became One Arm Bandit. And that lasted about 4.5 years. Drugs took their toll on the band, and as it does on a lot of bands. Yeah. And so when we broke up, I played in another band for about a year. And when that band broke up, I came home. I'd gotten married while I was up there. And I came home one day, I was really mad, and I said, let's move to Oklahoma. And my wife, I never dreamed she would say, okay, but she did. It freaked me out. But a month later, we were gone. We moved back to Oklahoma, and I've been here since, and that was 1987, and I've been back here ever since.
That's awesome.
And I've used that name, One Arm Bandit, quite a bit. I had One Arm Bandit, and changed members, had like, I don't know how many members, changed guitar players several times and drummers and blah, blah, blah. Anyhow, I got a band finally together about probably 15, 16 years ago. And we did lots of Led Zeppelin, and because that's where my vocal range is. And we would do 3 or 4 Zepp tunes every set, and people would just freak out over it. And finally, the drummer kept going, let's just do all Zeppelin. I think we can make more money. You're crazy. You're crazy. One, we had a gig at an arts festival, and they only gave us like 40 minutes to play. And he said, let's do all Zeppelin and see what happens. So we did, and people just went crazy. And we ended up playing for about an hour, and we had a meeting after that, said maybe he's right. So we changed our name to Uncle Zepp, and we started doing all Zeppelin, and that's what we do today. Yep.
That's awesome.
That's what we still do. Matter of fact, I don't know if you see my shirt.
Oh, yeah.
Uncle,
that's awesome.
We
do Zeppelin. We do Zeppelin. I love that so much.
Yeah.
So again, if you are in the Oklahoma area and you see that Uncle Zepp is playing somewhere, don't miss out on seeing these guys. Just an incredible story. Hoppy, I cannot thank you enough for your time. It's been a pleasure meeting you and talking with you over the last week or so. I am so thankful for your time. This is why I love doing this job. It's this stuff right here, because this is why music is magical. And, really at the end of the day, if your kid's in a band and they cut a little single CD or a 7-inch and they're super proud of it, and you're like, oh my God, this isn't so good. You might want to hold on to it, because you never know. 40, 50 years later down the road, it could be worth $1,000.
I wish I'd kept a bunch of them. I only kept one because I didn't think much of it. So then unclezepp.com. Lots of videos on YouTube and whatever. If you want to see where we're playing, you can look that up.
Find out.
Thank you so much, Mike.
Oh, yeah. Awesome. Absolute pleasure is all mine, Hoppy. Thank you so much. unclezepp.com. Check out Marble Phrogg, too. The album is great. Hoppy, thank you so much, sir, for your time, and it was a pleasure meeting you today.
Thank you, Mike. See you.
That was perfect. I'll get it edited, posted, all that good stuff. I'll shoot you a link once I get it posted and edited so you can check it out. And if you need anything else from me, please hit me up. You got my cell.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it.
Thank you. I'll see you later, sir. Bye.